High on the Tibetan plateau, far above busy roads and loud cities, there were places where time did not hurry. Stone monasteries rested against the mountains as if they had always been there. No clocks hung on the walls. No bells marked minutes. No one asked what time it was. Morning arrived slowly. Light touched the edges of the mountains first, then the walls, then the floor where a monk placed his bare feet on cold stone. There was no alarm, only habit, only breath. In Tibet, time was not something to chase. It was something to sit beside. The day did not begin with urgency. It began with stillness. In these monasteries, a day was not divided into hours. There was no morning rush, no afternoon deadline, no evening countdown. Instead, the day unfolded gently, guided by the body and the light. Monks did not look at watches. They listened to their breathing. They felt the cold air in their lungs. They noticed when hunger arrived, not when a schedule demanded it. Meals were simple and quiet. Tea was poured slowly. No one checked the time while drinking it. If one monk stood up, others followed. Not because they were told to, but because they were moving together. Time in Tibet was shared. It did not belong to one person. It belonged to the space between them. Life in the monastery changed very little. The same paths were walked every day. The same stones felt the same footsteps. The same wind passed through the same narrow corridors. To an outside world, this might have seemed boring. But boredom was never the point. Repetition was not something to escape. It was something to enter. Each morning, meditation returned. Breath after breath, thought after thought, and then slowly, fewer thoughts. The body remembered what to do. The mind stopped asking for something new. There was comfort in knowing what would happen next. No surprises, no sudden noise, no demand to be different tomorrow. In Old Tibet, repeating the same day was not failure. It was devotion. And as the days passed, time did not feel longer or shorter. It simply felt lighter. In the high monasteries of Tibet, days did not compete with one another. Monday did not feel different from Thursday. A new month did not announce itself. Seasons passed quietly without ceremony. A monk would wake before the sun, not because he had to, but because his body knew the rhythm of the mountain. The air was thin and cold. Breathing required attention. Each inhale was felt deeply, slowly, deliberately. Walking across the stone floor, he heard only the soft sound of his own steps. The walls were thick. They held centuries of silence inside them. Outside, the wind moved across the plateau without obstruction. No trees interrupted it. No buildings argued with it. The wind did not rush. It wandered. Morning practice could last a long time. No one counted minutes. No one waited for it to end. When it was finished, it ended naturally, like a breath releasing itself. Food arrived without announcement. Simple bowls, warm liquid, steam rising gently into the cold air. No one spoke about the past. No one planned the future. The day existed only as it was. In a world without clocks, there was nothing to be late for. Nothing to miss. Nothing to regret. Time, stripped of numbers, became soft. As the day moved forward, silence became deeper. Not an empty silence, but a full one. The kind of silence that carries small sounds inside it. The distant call of a bird, the slow scrape of fabric against stone, the faint clink of a wooden cup being set down. Each sound appeared, then disappeared without urgency. Work was simple and repetitive. Sweeping floors that were already clean, carrying water from the same place every day. Turning prayer wheels, one slow rotation at a time, there was no desire to finish quickly. Speed served no purpose here. Hands moved calmly. Breath followed movement. Movement followed breath. Sometimes a monk would stop and look out across the plateau. The land stretched endlessly, pale and quiet. Nothing moved fast in that space. Even clouds seemed unsure of where they were going. In those moments, the mind had nothing to hold on to. No list, no pressure, no unfinished task waiting impatiently. Only presence. In Tibet, time did not shout, it whispered. As the light began to fade, nothing needed to be completed. There was no feeling of before it gets too late. No race against the dark. Evening arrived gently like a familiar guest. Shadows grew longer along the stone walls. The air cooled. Breathing became visible. A soft gathering happened without instruction. Monks moved toward the same spaces slowly, naturally. No one checked where they were supposed to be. Candles were lit one by one. Their flames did not flicker nervously. They stood still, protected by the thick walls. Evening prayers were unhurried. Words were repeated softly, again and again. Not to reach an end, but to remain within the sound. Outside, the plateau darkened completely. Stars appeared without announcement. There was no entertainment, no distraction, nothing to fill the silence. And yet, nothing felt missing. In a place where the night was respected, sleep did not need to be chased. It arrived on its own. Night in Tibet was vast. Without city lights, darkness stretched across the land completely. The mountains became quiet shapes against the sky. The cold settled in slowly without shock. Inside the monastery, movement became minimal. Footsteps softened. Voices disappeared. Monks prepared for rest the same way they did everything else, without haste. Bedding was simple. Walls were cold. But the body adapted. Lying down, a monk could hear the building breathe. Wood contracting, stone holding the day's warmth. Outside, the wind continued its endless journey across the plateau. It did not know night from day. It did not need rest. Inside, breath slowed. There was no fear of wasted time, no thought of tomorrow waiting impatiently. Sleep was not an escape. It was part of the same rhythm. In Tibet, even rest belonged to the practice. Sleep in Old Tibet was not calculated. No one wondered how many hours they would get. No one worried about waking up too early or too late. The body slept until it no longer needed sleep. In the deep night, the monastery remained still. No artificial sounds disturbed the darkness. No distant engines, no sudden lights. Only the slow passage of air through narrow corridors. Only the steady rhythm of breathing behind stone walls. Dreams came quietly. They were not chased or analyzed. They passed like clouds over the mountains. Sometimes a monk would wake briefly, not with anxiety, not with urgency. He would simply notice the darkness, notice the cold, notice his breath, then sleep would return naturally. In a world without clocks, the night had no edges. It did not begin sharply. It did not end abruptly. It flowed, and somewhere between sleeping and waking, time loosened its grip completely. Morning did not announce itself. There was no sharp line between night and day. Slowly, very slowly, the darkness softened. The sky shifted from black to deep blue. Stars faded one by one without ceremony. Inside the monastery, bodies began to stir. Not all at once, not on command. A monk opened his eyes and remained still for a long moment. There was nothing waiting for him, no obligation pulling him forward. He listened first. The quiet was different now, lighter, less heavy than the night. When he finally stood, the stone floor greeted his feet again, cold, familiar, unchanged. Another day had arrived, but it did not demand anything new. It offered the same silence, the same breath, the same slow unfolding. In Tibet, the morning was not a beginning, it was a continuation. In the old monasteries of Tibet, urgency was unknown. No sound ever demanded immediate attention. No moment insisted on being rushed through. Nothing waited impatiently for what came next. Life unfolded at the speed of the human body, and the body was never asked to hurry. When a monk woke in the morning, there was no pressure to begin. He sat first. He breathed. He allowed the stiffness of sleep to fade slowly without resisting it. Cold air filled his lungs, not sharply, not suddenly. It arrived the same way it always did, quietly. Tasks did not line up in front of him like obligations. They appeared naturally, one after another. Water needed to be carried because water was needed. Floors needed to be swept because dust settles everywhere. Food needed to be prepared because bodies must be fed. No task existed to be completed as quickly as possible. Speed had no meaning here. If sweeping took longer, the sweeping simply continued. If hands grew tired, hands rested. If the cold slowed movement, movement accepted the cold. There was no frustration in this slowness, no sense of falling behind. Nothing could be late in a world without schedules. A monk carrying water across the courtyard did not think about efficiency. He did not measure the distance. He did not calculate how many trips remained. He walked. He breathed. He felt the weight of the water shift slightly with each step. The sound of liquid moving inside the container became part of the moment. The sound of footsteps on stone became part of the moment. Even effort itself became quiet. In the modern world, effort is often a struggle against time. In Tibet, effort existed alongside time, not against it. There was no reward waiting at the end of a task, no sense of accomplishment to be collected. When the floor was clean, it would soon become dusty again. When the water was carried, it would soon be needed again. This was understood. Completion was temporary. Continuation was permanent. Because nothing was meant to be finished forever, there was no pressure to finish anything perfectly. Days were not divided into productive and unproductive hours. They were simply lived. If the body moved slowly, the day moved slowly. If the body rested, the day rested with it. In a place without urgency, the mind softened. Thoughts stopped racing ahead. Regret lost its power. Anticipation faded. What remained was presence, wide, steady, unforced. Time did not disappear in Tibet. It stopped pushing. Stillness in Tibet was not an absence of movement. It was something that could be felt. Inside the thick stone walls of the monastery, stillness settled slowly, like dust in the air. It did not arrive all at once. It accumulated. At first, a monk sitting in silence would notice the body, the way the legs pressed against the floor, the way the spine held itself upright, the faint discomfort that came from remaining in one position. These sensations were not ignored. They were observed. Breath moved in and out without instruction. Cold air entered the lungs. Warm air left. There was no attempt to change the rhythm, no attempt to improve it. Thoughts appeared as they always did, memories from long ago, images with no clear meaning, fragments of the outside world. But in stillness, these thoughts had nowhere to go. They rose, paused briefly, and faded. Silence did not push them away, it simply outlasted them. Over time, the weight of stillness became familiar. It pressed gently against the chest. It slowed the pulse. It softened the edges of awareness. Minutes passed without being counted. Hours passed without being noticed. The body learned that nothing bad happened when nothing happened. There was no danger in stillness, no loss. The mind, no longer required to react, began to rest. In the absence of movement, sound became clearer. The faint crack of wood adjusting to temperature, the distant wind touching the monastery walls, the almost inaudible movement of fabric as someone shifted their position. Each sound appeared alone, complete in itself. Stillness gave these sounds space. In the modern world, stillness often feels uncomfortable. It invites questions. It invites doubt. In Old Tibet, stillness was trusted. It was not something to be filled. It was something to remain inside. As the monk sat, nothing needed to be achieved. No insight waited at the end. No transformation was required. The sitting itself was enough. And in that quiet wait, time lost its urgency once more. In the high regions of Tibet, seasons did not arrive with drama. There were no sharp transitions, no sudden declarations that one time had ended and another had begun. Change happened gradually, almost unnoticed. Winter deepened slowly. The cold did not shock the body. It introduced itself day by day. Breath grew more visible. Stone held less warmth. Movement became careful, deliberate. No one complained about the cold. No one wished it away. Extra layers were added quietly. Fire was used sparingly. Life adjusted itself without resistance. Spring did not rush in to replace winter. It softened the air first. Then the light lingered a little longer on the monastery walls. Snow remained in the shadows while paths slowly reopened. The ground revealed itself in small sections, never all at once. Summer was brief and modest. It did not demand attention. It passed through the plateau lightly. The sun warmed the stone during the day. Nights remained cool. No one tried to capture the season or hold on to it. Autumn followed without ceremony. The light shortened again. The air sharpened. The cycle continued. Seasons were not events to be marked. They were conditions to be lived within. There were no celebrations for beginnings, no mourning for endings. Everything was understood as temporary. In this understanding, there was peace. Nothing needed to be rushed because nothing stayed forever. Nothing needed to be feared because everything returned in another form. In Tibet, time was not a line moving forward. It was a circle turning quietly. Work in the Tibetan monastery did not lead anywhere. There was no future moment waiting to justify the effort. No reward promised at the end of the day. No recognition quietly stored for later. Work existed because life required it. Water needed to be carried every morning, not once, not occasionally, but always. Floors needed to be swept even though dust would return. Food needed to be prepared, even though hunger would come again tomorrow. Nothing stayed finished. This was not seen as a problem. A monk sweeping the courtyard did not imagine a moment when sweeping would be complete forever. He did not look for progress. He focused on the movement of the broom, the sound it made against stone, the feeling in the arms as they moved back and forth. Work was slow and repetitive, not because efficiency was impossible, but because speed served no purpose. There was no one to impress, no standard to meet, no expectation to exceed. Effort was not compared. One monk did not work harder than another to be seen. Each worked according to his strength, his age, his breath. When hands grew tired, they rested. When the body needed to stop, it stopped. No guilt followed rest. In the modern world, work often defines worth. In Old Tibet, work simply filled time. It did not elevate. It did not diminish. When a task was finished, it ended quietly. No satisfaction was collected. No pride was stored. Another task would appear, and it would be treated the same way. Through this endless repetition, work lost its sharpness. It became neutral, almost gentle, and in that gentleness, time once again loosened its hold. In the monasteries of Old Tibet, choice was limited. There were no endless options waiting to be compared, no shelves filled with alternatives, no pressure to decide between one path and another. Clothing was simple and nearly identical. Robes followed the same shape, the same texture, the same weight. No one expressed identity through fabric or color. Food was the same from day to day. Simple grains, warm tea, meals designed to sustain, not to excite. Days followed a familiar structure, not rigid but predictable. Meditation, work, rest, silence. To the modern mind, this absence of choice might feel like restriction, but within the monastery, it felt like relief. With nothing to choose, the mind became quiet. There was no anxiety about making the wrong decision, no regret about paths not taken, no energy spent imagining a better alternative. Life did not ask questions. It offered answers already formed. A monk did not wake up wondering what kind of day he wanted to have. The day arrived as it was, and that was enough. Without choice, comparison disappeared. No one measured their life against another's. No one wondered if they should be doing something else. There was nowhere else to be. This simplicity freed attention. Instead of being pulled outward toward possibilities, awareness settled inward, toward breath, toward movement, toward the present moment. Even desire softened. Without constant exposure to alternatives, wanting less became natural. Not forced, not disciplined, just natural. In the modern world, choice is often seen as freedom. In Tibet, freedom came from the absence of choice. Nothing needed to be decided. Nothing needed to be optimized. Life could simply be lived, and as decisions faded, time slowed with them. Aging in the Tibetan monastery did not begin with an announcement. There was no single morning when a monk woke up and realized that he had crossed a line. No number marked the change. No ceremony acknowledged it. No one pointed it out. Time worked quietly on the body, day after day, without urgency. Movements that once felt effortless began to slow, almost without being noticed. Steps shortened slightly. The body paused more often between actions. Hands rested longer on the knees before standing again. This change was never corrected. No one encouraged the body to return to what it used to be. No one praised endurance or speed. No one spoke of decline. An older monk was not expected to move like a younger one. He was not compared to his past self. He was not measured against anyone else. He was allowed to be exactly where time had placed him. Work adjusted naturally around aging. Heavy tasks were carried by those whose bodies were strong. Lighter tasks remained for those whose strength had softened over the years. This shift required no discussion. Rest was not something to be earned. It was not a reward for effort. Rest was simply part of the rhythm. An older monk sitting longer in silence was not seen as idle or unproductive. He was simply sitting longer in silence. There was no fear attached to aging, no quiet panic about what the body was losing, no urgency to preserve youth. The body was understood as temporary. It had always been temporary. Wrinkles were not signs of failure. They were signs of time passing exactly as it should. Hair turned gray without comment. Posture changed without judgment. In a place without ambition, aging had no enemy. There was nothing to fall behind. No race continuing without you. No future demanding that you arrive unchanged. The days did not belong to youth. They did not belong to strength. They belonged equally to every stage of life. An older monk waking in the morning did not regret what he could no longer do. He noticed what remained. Breath still entered the lungs. Light still moved slowly across the stone walls. Silence still waited, patient and familiar. That was enough. In the modern world, aging often feels like something being taken away, a narrowing, a loss. In Old Tibet, aging felt different. It felt like settling, like dust slowly returning to the ground, like movement gradually becoming stillness, like effort easing into rest. Time did not steal the body. It completed it. In the end, nothing needed to be concluded. There was no lesson to underline, no message to carry back down the mountain. The monastery remained where it had always been, resting in silence, breathing with the land around it. Time did not stop there. It simply softened. Days continued to repeat themselves. Breath continued to come and go. Light continued to move slowly across stone walls. And somewhere within that quiet repetition, life was lived without being chased. In Old Tibet, time was never something to control. It was something to share. When the day ended, it ended gently. When the night arrived, it arrived without demand. Nothing was forced to move faster than it could. Nothing was asked to stay longer than it should. And so, as silence settled once more, time loosened its grip, and everything was allowed to rest,